So IFSC students, what is an IFSC? An International Financial Service Center caters to customers outside the jurisdiction of domestic economy, dealing with flows of finance, financial products and service across the border. That is what I was speaking about it. They are actually essentially in the financial services, and that is what they do export. And from this they get or earn the foreign currency. So let's see what is the tax incentive which is available. Point number A, incentive for investor in securities listed in recognized stock exchange in IFSC. So this is, let's first do only the header. So this is the incentive for whom? For the investor in the security. Please highlight the word investor in the security. You all highlight investor in securities. So this is an incentive for whom? For investor in securities in the listed in recognized stock exchange in IFSC. That is point number A. Now if you see the next particular point, point number B, incentive for the units situated in the IFSC. Like for example, many of the bank branch are there in IFSC. Foreign bank also have got their branch. SBI, Bank of Baroda. This is some of the bank which I know they have got their branch in IFSC. So what is the incentive for the units which are situated in the IFSC? So that is for the units. The third one, if you have a look on this context, incentive for non-resident giving the loan. So those who give the loan, what would be the incentive for them? So that is covered over here. And finally, exemption to file ROI. In the ROI chapter, this point was there. I have told you at that time you will not understand right now. Wait for some time till the time this proper connection is established. Now you can appreciate what this exemption to file ROI would be all about. So these are the incentives, and then I have attached for all of you and most expected question. I have drafted for all of you. Took me around 2-3 hours to really frame up a question so that we can do a meaningful exercise of solving this particular question together. So now then let's read this one out one by one. So let's just get to know what are the incentives. So levy of STT and CTT. So on the left hand side I have given you that okay, there is a levy of STT and CTT, but what is the incentive which is given to the investor in the securities? So let's have a look. Provision of chapter 7 of the Finance Act 2004 providing for levy of STT not to apply on taxable security transactions entered into by any person on a recognized stock exchange located in IFSC where the consideration for such transaction is paid or payable in foreign currency, thereby exempting such transaction from STT with effect from 1st June 2016. So all the transaction of security in the stock exchange which is situated in IFSC, on that there is no STT at all. No STT students is there, not only STT but also commodity transaction tax. So the same condition, no STT on and CTT on the security which are listed in IFSC on their transaction, provided the transaction is made in the foreign currency. That is what is the requirement. That's a big thing. 112A, in fact students, this you will just wait for the CG to take off. At that time you will come to know what this is. 111A. Right now I can just tell you the concessional tax rate. This is simple word. On the transaction of the securities which will result into a capital gains, there is some requirement. If you remember 111A in IPCC, you have said that short-term capital gains would be eligible for a 15% tax rate, but there is a condition for that, and the condition is that the STT should have been paid. So the condition for that exemption is that the STT has to be paid, and only when the STT has been paid that the exemption would be applicable. Only when the STT has been paid that the concessional tax rate would be applicable. So there was a condition, precondition of payment of the STT, only then the concessional tax rate would be available. So the fact that in the case of the securities which are transacted in the stock exchange which is situated in the IFSC, on that transaction no STT has been charged. On that transaction no STT is charged. So one may argue that the concessional tax rate in the capital gains would not be applicable. So that argument will no longer be applicable. The concessional tax rate would be extended even in the case of what? Even in the case of the transaction in securities which are listed in the stock exchange in the IFSC where no STT is charged, still the concessional tax rate is applicable. So that is what these two are all about. Let's see this 47(7)(ab). Transfer of specified capital asset by a non-resident on a stock exchange in any IFSC. So what is a specified capital asset? We just need to know on that. And those specified capital asset, if transferred by the non-resident on a recognized stock exchange in any IFSC, those particular transfer will be eligible for the exemption. Meaning thereby no capital gains would be taxable in respect of those particular transfer. No capital gains would be chargeable in respect of those particular transfer, and they are transfer of the following capital asset. Which are those capital asset? By the non-resident in the IFSC shall not be regarded as transfer. So if it is not regarded as transfer, it is not chargeable to capital gains. Where the consideration for such transaction is paid or payable in the foreign currency, and they are bonds and ADR, GDRs, rupee denominated bonds, derivative instrument, and any other securities which are notified by the government. So if these are the securities on which the non-resident has transacted in the IFSC and thereby the transaction was made in the foreign currency, so in such particular case the capital gains that will arise on that, they will not pay any capital gains tax. This is creating a huge incentive to the non-resident to transact in these sophisticated instruments which are listed in the stock exchange situated in IFSC. In all these sophisticated instruments which are listed in the IFSC, they are inviting the non-resident to participate, provided with one condition: the transaction should be in convertible in the foreign exchange. 10(4)(d). Any income accrued or arisen to or received by whom? See the coincidence. Received by a category 1 and category 2 AIF as a result of transfer of capital asset referred to in 47(7)(b). So this is not only applicable for the non-resident. This is also extended to whom? To AIF category 1 and category 2. If AIF category 1 and category 2, if they are the one who are making the investment in these particular securities, sophisticated instrument which are listed in the stock exchange which is situated in the IFSC, then even these AIF will be eligible for exemption. By the way, you all know capital gains would have been passed through. Capital gain students would have been passed through. To whom it would have been passed through? It would have been passed through to the investor. So if to the investor it would have been passed through, then in that particular case we all know that the exemption would be available. If the investor to whom that would have been passed through, then the exemption would be available or extended to whom? To the investor. And therefore we say that this particular exemption ultimately will benefit to whom? To the investors, their ultimate investors of the AIF, because CG is something which is passed through to the investors. So that is one thing that we all know in this regard, and that is what 10(4)(d) is all about. Now the incentive for the units which are situated in IFSC, those who are doing the business, one of the biggest one, students, is the MAT. MAT generally is at 15%, but to the units which are situated in the IFSC, for them it is only at 9%. See what they have written. Subsection 7 of section 115JB provides that in the case of a company being a unit located in IFSC center and deriving its income solely in convertible foreign exchange, the minimum alternate tax shall be chargeable at the rate of 9% instead of 15%. So unit which is in IFSC and deriving the income solely, that is important, that is deriving income solely in convertible foreign exchange, then that unit will have the MAT liability at 9% instead of the existing rate of 15%. By the way, 15% has been amended by the Taxation Ordinance Act 2019. Earlier it was 18.5%, but now it is also undergone a change. If it is not a company, it is like a unit, like a partnership firm which is there. AMT we have seen 18.5% is there, but for them instead of 18.5%, 9%. See, this is a kind of a situation or difference. Earlier MAT and AMT both were at 18.5%. Now because of this Taxation Amendment Act, The MAT rate has gone down to 15, whereas AMT still continues at 18.5. So that is one important distinction that you should know. But so far as IFSC is concerned, even though you are a partnership firm which is situated in that particular IFSC area, from where you are primarily providing that financial service, and the income is solely consists of income is in convertible foreign exchange, then the rate of AMT applicable would be at 9%. Next is students 1150 DDT factor, whether the dividend that is to be distributed will that be charged or not. Let's have a look. Subsection 8 of 1150 provides that no tax on distributed profit shall be chargeable in respect of total income of a company being a unit located in IFSC deriving income, again the same thing, solely in convertible foreign exchange for any AY on any amount declared, distributed or paid by the company which is situated in IFSC, that is the company which is situated in IFSC, and what is more important is that they are earning the income solely in the convertible foreign exchange. Then in that particular case, what they say, that on the amount which has been declared, distributed or paid by the company out of its current income, either in the hands of the company or the person receiving such dividend. So there is no tax whatsoever primarily either in the hands of the company or the person who is receiving such dividend. Such a great thing. Just imagine the incentives which are available for those particular units. Fine. So this is what it is, 115R. This is also distributed profit, but that is for mutual fund. I told you there was DDT and thereafter there was mutual fund and surrogate tax, for which there were 10% plus surcharge plus cess. So even mutual fund units which are distributing what? Distributing the income to its unit holders. Now they will also be not liable for the distribution tax under 115R. ATLA students, profit link deduction. Students, this is a profit link deduction. It has been quite a time that we have touched upon profit link deduction, isn't it? ATLA, 100%, just focus on this one, herein. 100% deduction at the rate of 100% of profit increased to 10 consecutive AYs out of 15 consecutive AYs. Earlier it was ATLA for 5. By the way, it is applicable to whom? I'll just let you know, offshore banking unit and the IFSC. So offshore banking unit, meaning thereby I was just telling you right now about the Bank of Baroda, the other particular SBI or the HSBC, whichever bank, who has got a branch there in the IFSC, they will get 100% deduction in respect of the profit derived from this particular unit, and that particular deduction would be available for them for 10 consecutive AYs. For 10 consecutive AYs out of the 15 consecutive AYs which is already established. So this is what they will be getting it. Now the entire principle of students, what we learned in ATIA would be the same over here also. That is profit derived from the eligible unit. What is derived? It requires a very close nexus between the business and that particular unit. So that close nexus is what is to be seen. That is what word derived was all about. If you remember the interest income, the duty drawback, we have excluded it in determining the profit derived, isn't it? Because we have said that it is although chargeable under the PGBP, but it cannot be considered as being a profit which is derived. As far as the profit is concerned, students, if you remember the discussion we had into two frame. Profit is first of all the computed profit. The computed profit which is under the head PGBP. That is how first of all it is a computed profit. Thereafter we applied a legal fiction. The year in which you start opting for ATLA or ATIA or ATIB, from that year 10 consecutive years a legal fiction will apply. For that year 10 consecutive years the legal fiction will apply. What was that legal fiction? Can you recall that? What was that legal fiction? The legal fiction was, in computing the income, the said undertaking shall be considered as the only undertaking of the SSE, and therefore the prior period, the brought forward losses and all were being set off, even though the brought forward loss of this particular unit was already adjusted with the other income of the other units, but still because of this legal fiction we were trying to set off this brought forward loss from the current year eligible entity's income, profit. That was the impact of the legal fiction. The second part that we have seen was that the profit should be included in the GTI. That is also the second part. So if supposedly whatever is the eligible unit's profit, that profit also needs to be included in the GTI. So only to that particular extent, what would happen? See, you apply the legal fiction, that is fine, but then it will have to enter into GTI. And if it has to enter into the GTI, and if there is a loss from any other ineligible unit, in computing the GTI, these loss automatically gets adjusted. In computing the GTI, this loss automatically gets adjusted, and after adjusting the loss, it may so happen that your eligible profit may get diluted, and therefore a reduced profit of that particular undertaking would be forming a part of the GTI, in which case your deduction would also come down. This is what we have discussed. If you remember these 3 points, I still remember it. You can go and refer that particular thing, and in that you'll come to know the entire game. So I've revised those particular things for your benefit, students. Section 80LA has been amended to provide 100% deduction in respect of income of unit of IFSC from its business, which is approved for setting up in SEZ for any 10 consecutive AYs at the option of the SSE out of 15 AYs beginning with the AY. Fine. So that is the point. This is the amendment now 115A. What is this amendment? Now we all know in the non-resident taxation, the interest income primarily is charged to a special rate of tax. The interest income will be charged to a special rate of tax. Now that interest income which is charged to a special rate of tax, that is without any deduction of any expenditure, loss, or even a chapter 60 reduction, that particular interest income which is charged to a special rate of tax, that particular interest income will be without any deduction of the expenditure, loss, or even chapter 60 reduction. So let's think of a situation wherein there is a banking company, and the banking company primarily has a 80 LA deduction at stake, and at the same time they also have got 115 LA as their income. 115A as their income. What exactly is that? First let's read this provision and then I'll create a situation of the amendment. First, on the left hand side, students, read this one. Special rate of tax on dividend and interest income in the case of non-corporate, non-resident and foreign company, that is the point, and section 115A subsection 1 provides special rate of tax on inter alia interest and dividend income arising to non-corporate, non-resident and foreign company. 115 subsection A4 prohibits any deduction under chapter 6A from such income. Let's see what this amendment is. 115A section 4 has been amended to provide that such condition of non-availability of deduction under section 80LA shall not be applicable to deduction allowed to a unit of IFSC. That is, a unit of an IFSC can claim deduction under section 80LA against interest and dividend income specified therein. So if they are getting the interest income, like for example the bank, as I was telling you, the bank having a branch in IFSC, if they have given a loan, the bank has to be a non-resident. Definitely that bank has to be a non-resident. So it means that a foreign bank which is non-resident, if they have given a loan and which they are receiving as interest, say foreign currency loan, and if they have given a foreign currency loan for which they are getting a interest in foreign currency, so we all know 20% is the gross rate. So the bank, a foreign bank, it should be a non-resident. So let's take about the example of Citibank or an HSBC bank. If they are situated in the IFSC and they are the one who are giving the loan, so the loan which they have given in the foreign currency to any person, for that they will earn the interest income. Now the fact that their branch, which is a foreign branch, which is a foreign bank in IFSC, being a non-resident, they will be getting that income of 115A income to be taxed at 20%. So on that income, now this income is directly from their business. Interest which they are giving on the loan is directly from their business. So it is derived from their banking business, because for them interest is the main business. So therefore the interest income is derived from their banking business. Now, because of that reason, this interest will also form part of the profit. This interest income will also form part of the profit which is derived, and this profit is charged at a special rate of tax. So, question to all of you is whether the non-resident foreign bank who has got a branch over there and which is in receipt of the interest income which is charged to a special rate of tax under 115A, and it is forming a part of the profit which is derived from their unit, and it is forming a part of what? The profit which is derived from their unit. Will they be eligible? Will they be eligible for a Chapter 60 reduction or not under Section 80 LA? And the answer is yes. And the answer is yes. And this is what I have set up you for a question. This is what I have drafted a question to all of you students. And you can expect this question in the examination now. Incentive for non-resident giving loan to units situated in IFSC. So if any non-resident gives the unit a loan, then any income by way of interest payable to such non-resident by a unit located in the IFSC will qualify for exemption under section 1015, provided the money has been borrowed by it on or after first day of September 2019 is exempt from tax. So the money has to be borrowed on or after this date. If that is the case, then the exemption would be applicable under section 1015. So that is what it is. Now the last point, students, very important, which is about the exemption to file the ROI, is that all the units of the IFSC, will be eligible for exemption. Let's have a look. A non-corporate, non-resident or a foreign company having any income other than the business income chargeable under the Act during the previous year from any investment fund set up in an IFSC located in India. Which investment fund you are talking about it? Category 1 and Category 2 shall be exempt to furnish return of income under 139(1). However, this exemption is not available for a return of income required to be filed under other provision of the Act. So this, say under other Act, maybe you can say return in consequence of the notice under 148. So that exemption is not available. It is only for 139(1) return. They are exempt. Provided, definitely this condition always has to be there, that a TDS in respect of such income has been deducted and remitted to the central government by such investment fund, and there is no other income during the previous year. So, and this is also the case, no other income is there for such person who is otherwise required to file the return of income. So to whom they are talking about it? So they are talking about it about the individuals or the investor of the AIF which is situated in IFSC. Investors of whom? Of the AIF. And other than the business income, we all know that gets passed through, and that investor happens to be a non-resident or a foreign company. So that pass through will happen to this non-resident or that foreign company. So what they say, if the AIF at the time of payment of these incomes, namely all the incomes other than business income, if they have deducted the TDS, then the the investor will not be required to file the return of income under section 139(1). The only condition is that they should not have any other income other than those which is coming from the category 1, category 2 AIF. So this is what it is, students. Now I want all of you to peacefully go through this question number 12 once. Try to at least understand this question once. Okay, go through this question which is waiting for you. Since when? 5 minutes time, students. I'm giving you time. 5 minutes. Take a good time to just solve this one. Okay, and thereafter I will step in. Please go through this. students, hopefully you would have made certain analysis. Obviously, the math part of it you are not yet aware, so I have to handhold you a bit, but we'll just try to make a solution of the math side, which you will try to take into account later on. So here students, if you see question number 12, HSBC Hong Kong undertake its banking business in India through its various branches in India, including a branch in IFSC. All the consideration received by IFSC unit is in foreign currency. So that is one thing which has been there. It furnishes the following information based on which you are supposed to calculate its tax liability, including the MAT. So MAT part, as I told you, you will primarily will be in a position to appreciate later on. But still, I'll try to put forth some numbers to you. But at least the normal tax liability, we should be in a position to now tackle this, because that is based on the amendment side, which I was talking about it. So profit before taxation 50 lakhs and 300 lakhs, that is the normal profit. Out of the above profit, rupees 30 lakhs and 80 lakhs represents interest income on monies borrowed by Indian concern in foreign currency from IFSC branch and other branches respectively. But we are only concerned with that 30 lakhs because that would be at 115. In any case, even for that 300 lakhs, there would be a 115A angle which would be there because it's a foreign bank. However, in this context, non-resident, in this context, that 5% which we are talking about as the interest, that 5% interest would be calculated to you in this context. Provision for with deduction of chapter 6A 80LA would be given to you in this context. Provision for NPA as per the prudential norms 10 lakhs and 30 lakhs. So what is this provision? We all know we add back. Remember the provision as per the prudential norms, we always add it back, and thereafter we reduce. Reduce with what? Reduce with the entire category of the provision which is as per section 3617A. For a foreign bank, students, if you remember, the provision which is allowed as deduction is 5%. 5% of the total income. Total income before the brought forward of the losses and before the UAD. So 5% of the total income before the brought forward of the losses and the UAD is what would be considered for the purpose of deduction. Now other information in that particulars has been given to you. Brought forward loss for AY 1920 is 20 lakhs and 30 lakhs is for this. Now you'll say, sir, what is as per books? This data is required in your MAT calculation. In your MAT calculation, this data will be required. Right now, for the purpose of computing the tax liability, only this data will be sufficient enough. Only this data will be sufficient enough for the purpose of computing the tax liability. Okay. So in that case, let's then begin with this particular point. So right now, students, I'll solve only for the income tax liability. MAT, any case, once we do the MAT, you will come to know 9% is to be applied on the book profit, and that exactly how the solution has to be done with it. But more importantly, in this case, what we require is a tax liability, because there is this amendment angle which is also there, which you have to consider carefully. So on this count, when we have to compute the total income, computation of the total income and tax liability as per the normal provision, so first we will all compute the total income in this regard. In this situation, net profit as per books which has been given to us is 350 lakhs. So net profit as per books, total 50 plus 300 lakhs. Add to that, this provision, students, we will make an assumption that this provision for NPA is debited. And if it is debited, debit as per books is not to be entertained, only as per 3617A would be considered. So therefore, we add to this one the provision for NPA as per prudential norm. which is 40. Which is 40, and therefore which 10 plus 30, that is what has to be added, and now you less what? Provision for bad and doubtful debts. So provision for bad and doubtful debts. So how much is that provision, students? That we need to consider. You have to calculate this one. 5% of 390 lakhs, what we have, and minus from this is our total income, minus from this what? 390 lakhs minus the 30 lakhs of the broad fraud loss and 10 lakhs of this one. So this I have calculated. If you also would have calculated, this comes to 17.5. 17.5 is the amount, and thereby finally you get here in the total, you can just take 390 and 372.5. This is 372.5. Okay, and now you reduce the broad fraud loss, broad fraud business loss under section 72. So that broad fraud business loss is 30 lakhs, and then less the UAD under section 32(2), which is 10. And finally, your total income. Total income is how much? 332.5. 332.5 lakhs. So this is your total income on this context, 332.5 lakhs. And now you calculate, sorry, this is your gross total income, not the total income. So GT has 332.5 lakhs, and now chapter 6A. Which is deduction under section 80LA. And the deduction under section 80LA, students, is in respect of what? The profit derived from the eligible business and of that you take 100%, isn't it? Now how much is the profit which is derived from the eligible business is what we need to work it out. So we can just say this to be a working note, and then you get what? The total income. Total income, students. Let's see what is the profit which is derived of the eligible business in this context. Now students, if you see herein, in this context, they have clearly mentioned that the losses which is pertaining, you have a look, broad fraud loss of AY 1920, the loss pertains only to IFSC. So if the loss is pertaining to IFSC, then accordingly it's safe to assume that even UAD is pertaining to only to IFSC, because unless if there is a loss, then thereafter the UAD will be adjusted. UAD cannot be adjusted before the loss. Do you all agree? So we can make an assumption to that effect. Is this that these loss or the UAD which pertains only to what? The non-IFSC unit. IFSC being a profit center, they don't have at this particular point of time any losses or the UAD. So this is an assumption which has been made to that effect, that their loss is pertaining only to the non-IFSC, or the UAD is pertaining only to the non-IFSC, and therefore in that context, now you tell me whether this loss is fully adjusted in this particular computation of the profit. Is it fully adjusted? Yes, it is fully adjusted. So that is also we are knowing that these brought forward loss or the UAD are fully adjusted to that effect. So in this context, just come to this particular part. So how do we calculate the profit of the IFSC unit? So computation of profit, working note 1. Computation of profit derived by IFSC unit. So in this context, net profit as per books has been given. Now in this net profit, you have been told that there is also the interest income which is earned in the foreign currency. So how much is the net profit which is there in the books, which has been given to you? So net profit in the books is 50 lakhs. Now this 50 lakhs is after including what? After including that particular portion of the profit. Which particular portion of the profit, students? That portion of the particular profit which is chargeable at a concessional rate of 115A. Nevertheless, we have seen the amendment that even that is eligible for Chapter 6A deduction. So we will include that. Now you will do what? As I told you, the profit means the computed profit. The profit for the purpose of deduction means the computed profit. So you need to compute the profit. So you will add what? Add the deduction as per books, and that is as per the provision for bad debts. And for the IFSC students, it is 10. IFSC, it was 10. So this 10 is what is a deduction that you have claimed, and less the deduction under section 3617A. Deduction under section 3617A, and that deduction under section 3617A will be how much? 5%. 5% of 60 lakhs. So 5% of 60 lakhs in this context would be 5% of 60 lakhs will be how much? 3 lakhs. So therefore profit derived from the eligible business would be 57 lakhs. Profit derived from the eligible business, students, is 57 lakhs. So this is one thing which is there in this context, and with that now you will put that 57 lakhs into your main particular calculation. So please come back to this main calculation. Profit derived from the eligible business, 57 lakhs. And therefore, once you reduce this 57 lakhs, finally you will get the final answer. Total income 275.5 lakhs. 275.5 lakhs, isn't it? Now in this total income, students, now there is 115A income earned by the other branch. It is a non-resident foreign branch. It's a foreign bank having a branch in India. So HSBC, say Mumbai. So that is a non-IFSC branch, but it has earned but it's a non-resident. It's a non-resident. HSBC Mumbai branch, is it a non-resident? First tell me that. Yes. It's a non-IFSC, that is fine. But this particular HSBC Mumbai branch has on its loan given to the Indian concern is earning the interest. That particular IFSC branch on the that particular Mumbai branch on the loan which it is given to the Indian concern. Now on that loan they are earning the interest. Now that interest that they have earned, that will be taxed at 20% gross rate. Foreign currency loan has been given. Now be careful students. Unlike in the case of royalty and FTS, wherein the presence of permanent establishment in India got us to 44DA. I already told you in 44DA, 115A at that time that existence of permanent establishment in India will have no relevance so far as the charge of interest is concerned. Establishment of a P in India has got only an impact in respect of royalty and FTS, because if there is a P in India, royalty and FTS is charged under 44DA instead of 115A. But as far as the interest is concerned, interest income is concerned, establishment of a P in India will still be eligible for what? Will still be eligible for gross rate of taxes. So therefore at 80 lakhs, which is the income, please go through that particular interest part. There, go back to that previous booklet on the international taxation. There you will get that particular point in the non-resident taxation and 115A. Whereas in the case of interest income, even though you have a P in India, has got no relevance, but only it influences, the P in India influences only the two other category of income of the non-resident, and they are royalty and FTS. So here what happens students in this context, you have the income which is 80 lakhs. So in this entire income 275 lakhs, you can say that 80 lakhs on rupees 80 lakhs. So tax liability now when we calculate on rupees 80 lakhs, tax under section 115A at 20%, which is 16 lakhs, on balance total income, which is 275.5 lakhs minus 80 lakhs, you have 40%. So that is 40%, which comes to 78.2. So 16 and 78.2 is what would be the amount, and now you can take up the total, add it to 94.2. This is the total. Add to that the surcharge. Surcharge will be added for the reason being income has gone up. So accordingly, surcharge calculation which we have done in this regard is 6.59, and finally the HEC. HEC at the rate of 4%, which is 4.03 of the total, and that gives you the total tax liability. Total tax liability which is 104.82. 104.82. So students, this is what this total tax liability is all about. Now as I told you, MAT, we will try, it's simple thing. The MAT part is 9% of the book profit. You just need to know how to calculate the book profit, and this exactly how it will go. You will go and we will try to solve this question one more time. This is an important question, so you cannot be casual as far as this question is concerned. Did you all got this one? Fine students, so this wraps up one of the important